Hi everybody, welcome to the Integrated Award Environment's 9th Industry Day. Today we're going to be talking about the Common Services Platform Marketplace, and we're going to have a demonstration for you of the marketplace itself. As I mentioned, this is the 9th time that we've gathered for one of these presentations, and as always we look forward to a dialogue with you today. You will be able to hear us, but you won't be able to communicate verbally back with us. But in your open program, you'll see the chat log and the chat box in there. And throughout the presentation today, you can type in questions or other bits of information that you want to share with us. We'll be receiving that live as we go through the program this afternoon. So we'll post a summary of all the questions that you all post in there. And at the end of today's presentation, at the very end, we will have a question and answer session where our speaker will try and answer as many of the questions as we can get through. Any that we don't, again, will be posted on our public Interact page that I think most everybody on the line is familiar with. We also will post the presentation deck on Interact later after the program, but for the time being, you can access it in the files portion of the chat log just by clicking on it. You can download today's presentation at any time that you'd like while we're going through it this afternoon. Again, I think most of you are pretty familiar with our Interact site. You know that you can always get us there with any questions, comments, or things that you want to share with us. And of course, you can also always email us at iaeoutreach@gsa.gov. We monitor that email box pretty regularly every day. So, next one. So today we just have two presenters that will be walking through the program this afternoon. The first, we introduced you to at our last Industry Day, our new Assistant Commissioner, Eric Ferraro, who has taken over here at IAE. We'll do kind of an update of where we are within the program and what brought us to today's presentation. And then he will turn it over to Naveen Vembar, who is our IT Director, who will actually walk everyone through the rest of the program this afternoon. So really, without any further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Eric, and we'll get started.
Thank you, Ken. Here's a brief agenda of our event today. We're going to be showing you our Common Services Marketplace and provide information on the IAE application development process. I'm going to provide a brief background before turning things over to Naveen. First of all, for those of you who may be less familiar, I wanted to share what the Integrated Award Environment, or IAE, is. IAE is a presidential e-government initiative managed by GSA that oversees the operations and modernizations of 10 federal award management systems. At IAE, we seek to use innovative processes and technologies to improve the systems and operations for those who award, administer, or receive federal financial assistance, contracts, and intergovernmental transactions. IAE is governed by the Award Committee for E-Government, or the ACE, and is co-led within GSA by the Federal Acquisition Service and the IT groups here. IAE has a broad scope, 3.4 million users across our 10 systems. In SAM alone, we have 1.8 million entity management records, 538,000 of which are active registrants. In fiscal year 2014, more than $1 trillion in federal assistance and awards across 3.3 million transactions were reported in IAE systems. That's $1 trillion, by the way. IAE systems average more than 500 million hits or page views each month, and SAM averages almost 1.25 million searches per week. IAE's 10 standalone systems will be consolidated into one streamlined environment under the banner of sam.gov. This modernized environment will act as our data factory or app store and will offer many benefits to our users, including single sign-on capability, unified built-in security, open data, APIs, standardized authentication and role processes, and standardized tools and business rules. As many of you are aware, right now, IAE is in the midst of a large-scale modernization effort that will offer great benefit to our users. As part of this effort, we created a single foundational common services platform that will allow for faster delivery of new software, cost savings, shared security, increase software quality, and and data integration across the IAE systems. Now I'm going to turn it over to Naveen, who's going to show you what we've actually built so far.
Thank you, Eric. So, as Eric said, we spent a lot of time in the last 6 months, actually 12 months approximately now, including planning and effort and all of this work, to build out a platform that we can use to launch applications into IAE that actually is going to be expanded to sort of general purpose capabilities so that all of the applications that we need here in IAE can be built on a common backbone using common user bases, using common tools, so that this program can manage those activities and launch new capability as rapidly as possible, while also being sure that our capabilities, our applications are secure, that they're sustainable, that they're transportable across infrastructure backends as we need them to be, as well as supporting a modern approach to application development. Right, one of our basic core tenets is the idea that everything we build is API first, and so we're looking at how do we support that at the platform level as we go forward. So a lot of the work that we want to talk about here in this presentation is for those of you on the phone, right? If you're a developer, how are you going to work with us? What are we going to ask of you, and what tools do we have in place now, and what tools are we going to be building in, and what processes and capabilities are we going to be building in over the next few months as well? Because not everything is there just yet, but we're finding that as we go through and do work on building applications internally now, we're identifying, well, okay, where do we need to add capability? What actually do we need to adjust, redirect internally to make this work out? This is going to be a demonstration that leans very technical. It is really about the platform more than any of our existing applications, so that's just fair warning. Although those of you who've been to my Industry Day presentations in the past have certainly gotten used to me talking techie throughout. All right, I'll get the next slide. So what are we really trying to do here? There's some balance that we were trying to have where application developers can come in, build out capabilities, and we're going to give them maybe a more limited set of tools, right? It's not the world, it's not every single tool that's out there, but a set of tools that we know have worked with our platform, have gotten through security, have been constructed in such a way that our containers, which we'll talk a little bit about as we go forward, can actually use them. So that those tools at least are there and available to the developers such that applications can be built out. And that we want to be able to go from that baseline set of tools, which right now we'd say are Java focused, but we want to expand to our Pythons, our Rubies, our PHPs, and those things as we go forward, and Node.js and Angular, and some more of those tools as we execute in the near term. We want to find out what developers want to use and integrate it in a clean fashion into the platform, right? And that does mean coordination across the board with all of our GSA IT counterparts to make sure that our standards are met, our security is met, all of that is happening, and we can continue patching within the platform itself. We also wanted to create a certain amount of controls around development access, right? We have a team of folks who are focused on DevOps, so that the idea being that they're really the ones who are going to push applications through the process of going from the dev environments to the test environments to the staging environments to the production environments. Responsible for their the tactical application, the assurances. Additionally, we're between the ops teams, dev teams, and DevOps to make sure that those applications are deployable to environments and right. That means that as developers, if you're used to ID the ones who building out capability environment. We want to kind of all through that can we see right. So um, try to go quicker. Hopefully that makes it better. Across the, using the projects, but really a situation where you can Asian vendor. Okay, hold on. All right, so hopefully everybody has been had a chance to dial in via phone. I think that should address these issues. So this is a very basic idea, right? If you're a core vendor, this is what you're really doing, right? You're building out your code, you're writing your unit tests that are going to get run automatically every single time you're checking in code. You're checking that code into GitHub to make that work. We have the way that we're doing this, for those of you who are familiar, we have GitHub Enterprise that we're running internally that then that will, as we do open source, right, we're pushing all of that code out to GitHub public, right? So that is an expectation that we would have of anybody who's doing work with us, that we're working, that we push out our code to GitHub public, and eventually, as we work with our security folks and mature some of our processes, we'd actually want to work in the clear even as well. There's other folks involved here, and we have our product owners, and we have we in IAE use a modified version of the Scaled Agile framework to do our work. So we work at the portfolio level because there are 10 capabilities that we're working with that we have to manage in a unified manner. So, but at the team level, we use Scrum, right? So just good old Scrum, and we find and that feedback loop. We're working through, and we support that through the automation here, right? That's really what we're trying to do here. We have a DevOps team that's there to create independent tests and actually validate that the acceptance criteria is actually met, and that the code is deployable and works in a real environment. And we have, of course, coordination with our security teams throughout. This is, again, something that I would say there's a lot more to these processes. I basically picked some highlights and put them on this slide. I'm sure that people who have done Scrum forever would say, well, what about X? Well, X is probably in there. We just didn't call it out necessarily. So this is just a very high-level view of those capabilities. Why don't we move forward? So what do we have right now, right? We have our capabilities around Java. We use Spring Boot for our capabilities for Java, Angular. We use Postgres and MongoDB for our application, for our database deployment. We support Elasticsearch for our search capabilities. We have GitHub internally and externally. We use Docker for containerization, and I mentioned that I would get back to that a little earlier. Everything that we do within our environment, we actually containerize using Docker. So we use, we have a Docker registry within the platform that has good Docker images. We build with every build of a new application. We build an image that then is what gets pushed out to run and execute, and also to scale horizontally. Right, that's a very key part of all of this. That we want to use that Dockerization to scale horizontally, and also to create a transportable set of applications. As we go forward, one of the things that we're looking at is how do we engage that DevOps team to make sure the code that's pushed out into GitHub is actually buildable and runnable in a Docker container without the use of our CSP in the background for development purposes externally, right? That's how we do good open source work. You shouldn't have to have the CSP behind you to build our applications. So that's another element of that that we want to sort of make sure that we've created as a part of our process flow. We have a whole bunch of CI capabilities that we have in the environment, and that we're also adding to the environment as we go forward. We have Jenkins, which you'll see in the environment now to run automated tests and run automated builds within our environment. We use things like Chef as well for those of you who are interested in that. We're also adding in things like the Simian Army for performance testing, and Selenium for user interface testing. That we want to do the same thing that we do for Jenkins for everything else, right? Those tests need to run as you build code, right? So this is every build, every push, or nearly every push, depending on how we how many pushes we're talking about to GitHub, we'll start executing all these activities, right? To make sure that the code still runs, that the tests are still passing, all that good stuff, right? So we're really focused on driving ourselves to quality through automation of our tests. Not all the elements are totally in place as yet, but we're building these out over the next. But these capabilities that we have right now are sufficient to launch applications. Now, the next series of steps will be maturing those processes and integrating more rigorous and more robust continuous integration capabilities throughout. We actually have in the document, in the actual PowerPoint, a link to GitHub repository with our architecture that it's been redacted for security purposes, but you can see all the tools and all the capabilities that we actually have within this environment up there on the site itself, if you want to. Can we go to the next slide? Sure. So this is actually sort of another thing that creates some expectation around what you as a core developer would need to do if you're going to work within our environment, right? We really are looking at this and saying, okay, so we have, as I said, a scaled agile framework. What does that mean, really? Well, scaled agile framework, the way we've implemented it is we have quarterly releases with 2-week sprints within those quarterly releases. The reason why we have quarterly releases is we'll usually have many teams running that are actually interdependent. There are absolutely dependencies between them, and in order to basically successfully manage those dependencies, the scaled agile framework sort of puts us, that's kind of what we figured out makes good sense in terms of execution. So, in the last 3 months, we've really tested that out. We've had some work with a core developer in place, and lined up some of the changes to the platform with the actual core development that was concurrently going on, and we figured out, okay, let's go modify that process a little bit. Let's make that better, this better. But what we saw was largely it was working as it was designed, right? That we were able to contain within a quarterly release those dependencies and execute them amongst them. And as we go forward, those interdependencies become very important to us because the first there's a reason it's called the integrated award environment. It is because the data within the integrated reward environment, the power behind that data is actually through those integrations, right? Within the IAE, as Eric has said, right, we have opportunities, and we have our contract actions, we have our, our registrants. Right now, if you go to SAM, and you go to FBO, and you go to FPDS, there's very little that ties those three things together in a rigorous manner, and actually in a manner that's useful to the public at large, to the vendor at large, to the contracting officer. There still is just a lot of disconnect between those capabilities. So even as we build out our cores, we have a unified view of the data in the end, and that also drives to a unified view of our APIs that need to work to be able to work together, but are independently developed. So in order so this is why we really drove towards this model of SAFe, and sort of defining what we would see as what do we mean by done at each of these phases, right? At a release level, which is at a quarter, what do we mean by done, right? Everything's got to be tested, that we have, what we're calling infrastructure as code capabilities. In other words, I can just launch directly from code into a working environment. We have automated regression testing. All of those things are required to say that a release is complete. A feature is something that usually lives across, in the SAFe parlance, lives across sprint. So what do we really mean by a feature? Those are sort of medium-sized, sort of stories that might take a couple of sprints to execute on. And then, of course, the user story, right? And which is a real piece of business value executed on within 2 weeks and built within those 2 weeks using the Scrum process. How do we actually talk through building those things out? What do we actually need to do within that environment, right? What we're really sort of saying is things like, well, if you build within those 2 weeks, don't build something that isn't 508 compliant in those 2 weeks, and then come back and say, oh, we're going to go fix that later on, right? No, you account for that as we think about what does 2 weeks mean to us, right? We're going to build the capability for somebody to post an opportunity. But in that 2 weeks, we do all of this testing. We use automation around that as well, right? So this is the approach that we're really taking here. All right, moving forward. So let's I think I've touched a fair amount of this, right? All of the code here will be public, and we're working on making sure that we can actually work in the clear. And working in the clear will be something that will be very valuable to us as we go forward. Agile development, Scrum on a 2-week cycle. Scrum on a 2-week cycle, and quarterly releases in our SAFe model, and then an API first model. So this is something I didn't totally touch on here. And what is an API first model? It means that everything that we do from a business perspective is available via an API. If we're talking about posting an opportunity, there is an API that is going to be used to post that opportunity. And that API is what you build your application on top of. So those things need to come first. We actually are using a hypermedia model called HAL for this work, which will allow us to have independent developers building out these individual APIs and individual applications, but allow those developers to reuse the data, the business capabilities, those elements as we go forward. The vast majority of our data is public, which does mean that we're going to use api.data.gov, connect our data out to api.data.gov, and make it available with all the throttling and all that other good stuff that we need to maintain our performance requirements. But if it's public, we don't want to restrict or prevent people from using that. The only thing that we're going to create some agreements around would be who can write to our data sets, right? If you want to go and create the better version of, or actually no, the best example would be we have contract writing systems that are out there in the world that need to write to FPDS data and to our opportunities data sets, right? So we'd work with those folks to create, give them the right access rights so that they can use those write APIs, right? And the reason we want to create a little bit of control over that is it's our responsibility, IEE's responsibility, to be good data stewards. So and that has certain implications that around the legality of what we're pushing into our databases and things like that we do have to control. So what this allows us to do is really to create a fabric across IAE that uses all of this data well, that allows for the openness of the data, allows for the discovery of this data in the public sphere, and be able to execute within a shared environment, even with different vendors across the platform. All right? All right, let's do a quick demonstration here. And I'm not going to touch on everything that we can do and that within these environments. But I just want to show you a couple things, a couple key screens about how we go into deployments of applications. Oops. And we're going to do a quick share. Let me say share. And I'm going to share my desktop. Okay. That's not what I want to do. Let's do this. So we have here, and I might need to log in again. Yes, I do. The marketplace. This is what our developer user would really be interacting with. And this is, again, for developers, not for the general public. If I can type in my password right, that would be good. Yep. Perfect. That should be great. So I created a couple things. Well, let's go create a new application and just show you a little bit of the basics of what that is. So let's do Industry Day Part 1. Okay. And right now, what we have is a very basic and, go create servers of this size in our, what we call our component environment. And what we're working to as well is to increase sort of the flexibility for defining at the DevOps frame the scalability of the applications. Right now, application scalability, there's a little bit of manual requirement to make that work, but we're going to add that into them as we go forward. I'm just going to create this. All right. Go create an application. So what's happening here, what happens when I go create an application is I have, and you can see I have part 2 and part 3 coming up. Part 2, part 1, what's happening here is actually those servers that I just requested to get created are now being created, right? That's one part of this world. Let's go create these servers, launch them. And this is all running on AWS. It's using, for those of you who are familiar, RDS, and and for the database backend, we have EC2 instances and S3 instances that are being launched with this to support the application. You'll note here that we have 4 different environments: component, minimum capacity, which is basically, so component would be, you're a developer, you're working every day, you're checking in code, that's where you're working. Minimum capacity, which would be where the DevOps is going to live at the end of a sprint, right? They would see, hey, this is always up to date to a sprint, right? This is, if you know safe tolerance, it would be where your potentially shippable increment in safe would reside at any given point in time. That's really for our independent testing, our demonstrations to users, and all that good stuff that's happening. Production-like, which is where you're going to start hammering at the application, right? That's something where you'd be going in there and you'd be saying, well, let me figure out, like, what does this database fall over when I pretend that 2,000 concurrent users are hitting it? 3,000, a million? What happens when I start tripping using the Simian army to create some chaos within the environment? What happens there? And then master, which is production. And so rather than waiting, and we won't wait for these to get provisioned, this is about between a 5 and 10 minute process where not only are we just creating the servers, but we're running chef scripts to provision the individual servers within our configuration using standardized configuration that support the Docker instances that we need to be able to support and the software that we need to support within them. And then we're doing some additional, I believe, scanning as well to ensure that that all happens. Now, let's see here. I'm going to scroll up. Industry Day Part 1. Let's talk a little bit here about some of the roles that we're going to provide here. What I did was I essentially created a project within this environment, and we can create project managers. Those project managers can create developers. I'm not going to walk through this whole process. But they can also create DevOps users. And each of those users has a different role, right? A developer can check in code into the component branch, which I'll show you in a moment, but nowhere else. A DevOps user is the only one that can move code up between those branches, right? Those are sort of things that we're supporting within this environment. We also have connectivity here to a couple other capabilities, which I actually don't think I have access to within this user. So like our IAE Data Lake, which is our underlying support for the shared data environment that all of the data within IAE is going to reside in, and that a lot of the read APIs, for example, will come out of that environment. A lot of our analytics will come out of that environment. Connectivity to API Umbrella, which thanks to our friends in 18F, I see Noah is actively typing over here. We're using that within this environment and also connecting to api.data.gov. So let's go to part 2. So I have created part 2. I created that a little earlier. And so what you can see here is that the provisioning for these servers is complete. So let's go look at let's go look at the actual list of services. So here, I know services associated with this particular part 2, and so what is a service really is an application, right? It's a component of an application. What I'm going to do is we have a sample service that actually we built, which the sample service is really three capabilities, 3 services, API-driven services, 1 user interface service, and a Docker Compose service that puts all 3 of those things together. So let's go create that service. And that takes just a few moments. So there we go. And there's a couple minutes here where there's some Docker work that's actually happening in the back end, and there's a push over to GitHub. And right now, there's a little bit of a delay between when the push to GitHub happens. So normally what I would do is I would just click on this, and I would click on component, and you would see, hey, oh well, there you go, the code populated immediately. Great, perfect. So what actually happened there is the sample service, let's go here, right, created within our environment. So this is actually still building out. But within the part 2 Docker service, you'll see I've got a GitHub repository, and it's got a Docker Compose configuration for this particular service. Here in the UI service, in about, I think, 4 or 5 minutes, you would see a bunch of code, which I'll show you in my other instance as well. And what you'll notice, for those of you who are familiar with GitHub, right, there's 4 branches here, and these 4 branches, with no coincidence, map directly to those environments that we built, that we referred to earlier. And in fact, a check-in to one of these branches is a push to those environments. We're using tools like Gitflow and Jenkins in concert to really make that push happen. Let's see here. Oop, nope, I went all the way back, so that's not exactly what I want to do. So, and at this point, what I would say is, let me see actually if it launched. Yeah, okay, so here we are. You can see here within a few minutes that code is now up in the environment. And what I can do is I can go back to this Docker service. Oops. I can go back to this component branch, I'm sorry, for the Docker service, and I can just say deploy. We set ourselves up in this environment to say, if I say that I want to go and deploy the Docker Compose service, it's going to go and it's going to hit all 3 of those other services that we saw earlier and start working on deploying them. So each one of these services is being actually worked to deploy. You can see here that there's a Jenkins flow here that's starting to build out that capability and push it up into a working environment. That takes, with all the Jenkins work and all the Docker Compose work and all the Docker image work, for the first time out, takes about 10 to 15 minutes. So rather than making you just sit here and watch this screen, I of course went and I created part 3 for this discussion, which is exactly the same sample service. And what you have here, if I keep clicking on that thing, and what I mean to do is click on this. What I have here within, that's not the, actually I clicked on the UI service, I'm sorry. I meant the Docker service, right? I wanted to go to the Docker service. What I have here in the Docker service is a URL. I deployed this about 15 minutes before, 10-15 minutes before the this presentation. So I have a URL, and one of the things that we've done here is we created essentially sort of a virtual desktop environment for developers to basically be able to come in. This creates, it's kind of funny, we did it partly because what we didn't want to have to do is force people into the GSA, to sit here and be part, in the GSA environment and have to go through all the badging and all that stuff. But in order to do that, we created this VDI environment, right? So that we could control the network flow, but also give ourselves the ability to allow the developers to launch this stuff into a working environment that they've shared together, and still hit URLs that are useful to them. And so, this is a URL that you can see that I launched, comp108.108.prod. It lives it's in this environment, and you can see, hey, here's our food and wine application. I can go add a wine, type in all this information, mine, red, and it's 2014, and add the wine, and then we should be able to see that out of the database. Oh, actually, I don't think I hit reload, did I? Okay, so that should come up shortly. And because this is running on a very small environment, everything kind of runs slow in the comp environment, which is kind of by design, right? We don't want to necessarily run huge, large Amazon services unless we need to. Yep, and so here we are. So that's kind of our flow, and what I can do here, and I can go to, let's go to the UI service here. I keep clicking, I always mean to click on this, and I never do that, right? And within, you can see here we have the code, our Java code. Oh, actually, it's within the resources, static, index, I believe, right? Yep. So this is actually the code for the front page of the user interface, and I could just do this. And commit, because I'm a developer, I'm allowed to commit to comp and not to anything else. And at that point, it starts running the deployment process in the background. The whole Git flow process, which, that's again another 5 minutes of waiting here. So we're not going to necessarily do that, but maybe at the very end, I'll go and hit refresh so you can see it. But that basically kicks off the build process, the test process, the deployment process in the background, right? So there's a lot of work that went into making sure that this all sort of happens. And is something that assures us as IAE, as a program, that what you're building and deploying actually is going to work within our environment. It hopefully gives you the capability to work without having to worry about all of the application, all the infrastructure ends of the world, the plumbing as we call it, because you're going to get tied into our access management capabilities, our data capabilities, our, obviously our platform and hosting capabilities, our shared search capabilities. All of that stuff becomes available to you as a developer through this environment, right? And we're working to make this environment better and easier to use, to execute on using those shared services throughout the IAE environment. And, we'll note, too, right, this is a bit different than a more bare bones pass, right? We're making decisions here, and we're taking advantage to a certain extent that IAE is IAE, right? There's a scope to the integrated reward environment that we wanted to take advantage of. So it isn't necessarily, I would be the first person to argue, this is not a general purpose PaaS platform. It's not really designed to be. But as we work together with other people in the GSA, I think we were going to see a lot of the features here go directly into something that would be more a general purpose capability for PaaS as we go together. That is, and also would differentiate. It creates sort of a larger set of environments. It's something that is maybe not as lightweight as a very simple sort of Heroku style platform as a service or whatever, but it is something that allows a bit of control and a bit of governance around all of this that isn't hopefully too intrusive to you as a developer. So at this point, I'm ready to take some questions, and I know that questions have been popped up. Yes, and any questions that any questions that you have, make sure that you put it into the chat log. and we'll start answering them. Okay, first question, will one of the services already in the IE paths be the underlying data sets of the systems listed, or will developers need to work with IE directly? Absolutely. So the idea of API first within this environment is absolutely not. The developers will not need to work with IE directly to access certainly public data. The only places where we'd see direct interaction with IE would be for access to data that is sensitive, PII kind of data that isn't public, or data that you want to write, right? If you want to make a better widget for writing opportunities, which we want to certainly encourage people to do as we develop these APIs. We'll have to create an agreement to do that to do those rights, but we want to encourage that, right? So it's on us to not be too stingy with that as we go forward and actually find the right ways to execute within that environment. Okay. So what's in the data lake to start? So let's talk. So that's a great question, right? So within our environment, we really have. So it's interesting, right? As IAE, we talk a lot about our systems, and we talk about systems like FBO, which is our FedBids Ops, and FPDS, which has all of these contract actions. But we don't talk, in my view, we're really sort of shifting our language as we modernize towards a data-oriented view of the world. So what is our data? What is IAE's data? Our data is, what I just mentioned, opportunities. It would be information about registrants who want to do business with the federal government. It's information about contract actions that are placed currently in FPDS, right? So all the contract actions over $25,000 that aren't classified are within the FPDS environment. Those are the big three, but we also have exclusions, right? Those who can't do business with the federal government. We have information about past performance, some of which is public, some of which is very much not public. And those things all tie together. So what's available in the data lake first? There is a roadmap that we've worked through governance. We have IAE as being an ACE governed, an e-government program. We have a roadmap, and I believe we will be posting updated versions of that roadmap as appropriate to the integrated award environment. Unfortunately, the issue becomes that roadmap has acquisition-sensitive information in it, so some of it we can publish, some of it we're looking to figure out, in my view, how much we can publish and really push out there to the world without running afoul of any of those other issues. But in the early go, we really talked about the opportunities work. We've talked about looking at our contract actions, our federal FPDS, what we're calling FPDS right now, in the early go, and our grants programs catalog, the catalog for domestic federal assistance, federal domestic assistance, CFDA, as well, the early goes in those data sets. So those data sets will become available in the near term, and what we would want to do is similar to what we've done in the past with OpenIAE. Similar to what we've done in the past with OpenIAE, we publish information about our APIs and take feedback through OpenIAE regarding, what do our APIs look like? What data is available? Those are questions that we would want to have. Okay, so let's talk about how the data would be connected to data.gov. We absolutely will continue our process right now. If we push data out to data.gov, we of course would publish our APIs, information about our APIs on data.gov. We're using api.data.gov as we go forward for managing our APIs as well in the public sphere. And so the changes that you would see would be regarding how we're publishing our data is really primarily around, hopefully, good, usable, business-oriented APIs, right? That's the big thing. As and we'll work with our user base and to see what other methods means, what other transformations we might want to do to that data using the tools that we have within the Common Services Platform to make it more easily accessible to them, right? And for those of you who are doing integration with, for example, the SAM data extracts and things like that, those things aren't going away, right? We are fully aware that, that us touching any of our existing interfaces really creates a lot of problems for folks, for those who are doing integration. So a lot of the work, if you are looking at being a core developer, a lot of the work will also be taking those APIs and making sure those APIs translate to legacy interfaces, so those legacy interfaces can be maintained over time, because we have within IAE integrations with more than 120, 150 applications across the federal government, and we're very, very aware of any breakage of those integrations causing significant mission problems for every one of those 8 client agencies out there. So we're very, very aware of that. Yeah, so we had a question about debugging tools. So what we have within our environment, we have Docker with debugging enabled, so that in this case right now, what are we talking about? What we have available is our Java capabilities. So being able to do Java debugging is actually enabled through the Docker containerization, through the component branches. As well as, one of the advantages of doing it this way, you can still work within your own local environment, right, to do your own debugging before pushing into component as well, right? But it's absolutely key that we do enable, debugging through good, easy means through the Docker instance. And we've actually done this using Eclipse as well as, and other IDEs I'm sure will work as well, because we're just using the standard Java debug capabilities. As we go forward, that's a key component as we add new languages in there, right? We can't put ourselves in a position where debugging is infeasible as new languages get added. So that's something that, that's why we wouldn't turn around and say, oh yeah, just go ahead and use X language right away. We want to make sure that all this stuff works for you. Any other questions? So I think, unless there's any last questions, okay, great. You demonstrated the development of an interface. Does the capability exist to develop a web service where IAE data can be consumed by my application? Absolutely. So the interface, the user interface you saw is actually a user interface. But as I said, there were 3 services that were part of the whole capability that we launched. 2 of them were actually REST APIs. And so we're using that model for all of this work. And then web service interfaces are certainly part of that model. We have to be able to support that. We are, and as I just said a few minutes earlier, right, building out that capability to support legacy environments is going to require us to build SOAP, for example, SOAP services, because that's what both SAM and FPDS have built into it right now. So that hopefully answers that question. And then Noah, great question on the certain design elements. Yes, absolutely. We have adopted the CIO CIO playbooks design standards, which are linked in the chat. We adopted them within days. As soon as I basically walked into work the day after that thing, I saw that thing and I said, hey, this is what we're going to use, and we started using it. And so the marketplace itself has not been styled toward that. But the applications that we've been working on lately have been, and quite successfully so. I think everybody had it was a joy to use those capabilities. So hopefully, and we'll let you, type in any additional capabilities. Oh, good. A couple last questions. Good. So the APIs for existing applications, will they work? Yes. The idea would be we will be replicating those interfaces in place, and more likely than not, the model that we would use is we build a native REST HAL-driven API that then has a facade in front of it that translates it to a SOAP interface, or it does an extract out of the data lake to do the CSV-driven extracts, whatever we need to do there to support the legacy interfaces as we go forward. But what we hope is that over time, the folks who are doing integration with us will find it more useful to be integrated directly to the REST capabilities, the REST-driven, HAL-driven capabilities, because that would give them access to the other IAE capabilities directly through the URLs within that API. So we hope that that's something that we work to over time as we do this modernization. How's the health of the apps monitor? This is a great question. We're actually working through monitoring. We do have we're going to be building in a couple customized dashboards using the Amazon, using a combination of the Amazon APIs for monitoring of the infrastructure, plus capabilities that would work more at a Docker level and at a component level to put together some dashboards. And we want to work with our DevOps team to sort of define what those requirements are. We have a number of tools, and I don't have them in the top of my head, but they are listed in the architecture document that was linked to earlier in the presentation, so feel free to go in there and take a look. Those are all sort of there. So, okay, so yes. To answer the last question, so will this all be ready as available as part of the FBO and FPS modernizations? Yes, absolutely. We're already doing work. In the last few months, we had worked on the CFDA modernization, which was awarded in September, if I recall correctly. And we've already begun work in this environment. We've already sort of figured out, hey, we need to go in, improve this. We have to get better processes around this. We have to do, those sort of, we have to document this a little bit better. So, we're learning using that process to execute within. And, and our hope is as we go forward that we, and actually not our hope, our intent, not our hope, is that we're going to be publishing all those documents and processes at least along with our acquisitions, if not onto public websites as necessary. So I wanted to close out and thank everybody for your attention. And of course, for keep typing in questions here into the chat for another 4 or 5 minutes, and we'll post them onto Interact, answers to those questions onto Interact as we go forward. And some of the questions we'll be able to answer, some of them we won't. But I hope that those of you who are looking to work with us and become developers of this platform have a better sense of what we're doing here and how it might work for you. So thank you very much. Stay tuned for information about the next industry days. We'll be using the usual channels of Interact and the emails that you've signed up for to give you information about what comes next for us. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon.